You have some training and experience that led you to attain this position you currently have.
Yes, I do.
And can you talk about your, I guess, college schooling forward? I don't need to hear every seminar you ever went to, but the main parts of your schooling.
Sure. I graduated from the University of Michigan, Dearborn with a degree in biological sciences before attending Wayne State University from 1991 and graduating in 1995. After graduation from Wayne State, I did a family medicine residency for 3 years, and I became a family practice doctor for 9 years. At that time, I changed my mind about some things, and I undertook an additional residency in anatomic and clinical pathology. So I left my family practice, went back into residency training at Beaumont Hospital, and I trained in anatomic and clinical pathology, which is a 4-year residency. After that, I did a 1-year fellowship in forensic pathology in Cleveland.
The pathology that you had undertaken the 4-year training in and the 1-year forensic pathology, can you just tell the jury what the difference is?
Well, pathology is a very broad subject, and it has to do with disease or the lack of disease and how we decide which is which. And anatomic pathology is a field in pathology that studies organs and tissues and sometimes whole bodies. And clinical pathology is a subspecialty that studies the analysis of body fluids and tissue samples. And then forensic pathology is the subspecialty that is involved in recognizing and interpreting disease and injury and applying that information for legal purposes. Now, there are many other subspecialties. Some people specialize in the gastrointestinal pathology. Some people specialize in obstetrical and gynecologic pathology. Some people specialize in psychology. My specialty was forensic pathology.
Doctor, maybe as a family physician or maybe some of your colleagues would on occasion go to somebody's house, maybe days gone by, would go out and make a house call to help diagnose a patient. As a forensic doctor now, do you have occasion to leave the medical examiner's office ever to go out and help you do your job?
We do this particularly in instances that involve suspicious deaths or possible homicides.
Have you testified in court before?
Yes, I have.
And have you been qualified as an expert in forensic pathology as a doctor in the circuit court here?
Yes, I have.
In the district courts around the state of Michigan?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move to qualify the doctor as an expert in her field of forensic pathology.
We would have no objection, Your Honor.
Yeah, the jury is to consider her as an expert in her field.
Now, in this case, the death of April Millsap, did you have an occasion to go out into the field to help you do your job?
Yes, I did go out to the scene.
And do you have any recollection about what time it was you got to the scene?
I arrived at the scene around 1 in the morning on July 25th.
Was April still present?
Yes, her body was still present.
When you got there, describe generally what you saw.
Well, I arrived at the scene along with 2 investigators from the medical examiner's office around 1 in the morning. And this was a somewhat rural area off of the Macomb Orchard Trail. And law enforcement had been there several hours prior to my arrival. But when I arrived at the scene, law enforcement was there, and there was some bright lights illuminating the area where the body was located. And from the path that I was on, I could just make out the fact that there was a body some yards into the brush. And then I was able to go into the brush, and that's when I saw the body of a teenaged female lying on her back in the vegetation.
Did you conduct a visual examination of the scene?
Yes,
Did you do that in conjunction with other investigators on the scene?
yes.
Okay. One of the things, and we've seen a couple of photographs, and we may see a couple of more, and I want the jury to understand, and you probably know why we moved the TV here. There were some scene photographs taken, is that correct?
Correct.
And you reviewed those scene photographs that we're going to look at right now, correct?
Yes,
Some of those photographs, now you're a trained doctor, right? You autopsy bodies when they pass away under varying circumstances, correct?
yes.
So what you see may not be as upsetting. I just want to make it clear, some of these pictures are not something where people like me are used to seeing.
There is a more clinical approach that people who do the type of work I do are able to engage.
The photographs that we're going to look at, were they important to you in beginning to interpret the scene, the body, the injuries? Did they help you gain an understanding of ultimately what led you to write an autopsy report?
Yes, and I also wrote a report of my findings from the scene. But rather than ask people, did you see this? Did you see that? Did you photograph this? Did you photograph that? I find it far easier to just be at the scene myself and witness it and experience it and bring my own impressions back, rather than having to rely on other persons' interpretations.
And ultimately, you did then write a report of diagnosis and autopsy on April Millsap. Is that
Yes, I
correct?
did.
And that was as a result of what you saw and observed at the scene, and then went back into the medical examiner's office and did, correct?
Yes,
And additionally, you received some toxicological findings.
yes,
Toxicology, I guess we would call it. And those can play varying roles in terms of their import when you make your findings.
right.
In this case, ultimately, we'll tell the jury what you found in the toxicology analysis and how that was important or not in this case, right?
Correct.
All right. I'm going to show to counsel what I proposed as People's Exhibit 74 and show this to you and ask if you recognize it.
Yes, this is my complete autopsy report and the toxicology report.
I move to amend 74.
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
You can keep that with you. One of the questions that we ask medical examiners in court is a question about cause and manner of death, and whether cause of death and manner of death mean the same thing to you, or are they two distinct terms? Can you explain that?
Cause and manner of death are very distinct categorizations. The cause of death, it refers to the illness, disease, or injury which initiates a series of events that directly results in death, and without which death wouldn't have occurred. So that's the definition of cause of death. Manner of death is actually for public health statistical analysis purposes. It has no legal bearing. It's a description of how the cause of death came about. And we have 5 categories in the state of Michigan from which to choose.
What are those categories?
Those categories are natural, accident, homicide, suicide, or indeterminate.
And when you just told the jury it has no legal bearing if you call something a homicide, Is that because ultimately it's up to a jury to decide whether something is a homicide legally in a trial, in a court?
Homicide, for the purposes of a medical examiner, means that the death occurred at the hands of another individual. As far as what the legal ramifications of that are, that comes from the prosecutorial aspect of the case.
Without telling us what they are, did you gather and gain enough information in this
Walmart
case
today
to
revealing
ultimately
a major commitment, donating 6.5
conclude
million
the
bottles.
cause of death and manner of death?
Yes.
And I want to get to that at the conclusion of what led you to that. I want to take you through the steps, because that's kind of the end of your report, even though it's on the second page, right? I mean, that's the last thing you fill in, I imagine. All right. I'm going to show some photographs, and I'm going to go through the report. And again, just to be clear, some of the photographs are going to be unsettling. But I also want to lay this out. There were photographs taken at the scene, is that right?
Yes.
And there were photographs taken at the medical examiner's office.
Yes.
An autopsy of a person to somebody who's not a clinician, and looking at it from a clinical view, cuts are made into the body, is that correct?
Yes.
And in this case, you can give a verbal description of that to the jury.
Okay.
Do you feel set, I mean, will that be sufficient for you to describe your findings?
Yes.
Okay. But there are certain injuries on the outside of the body that are visible that we want to talk about when we have photographs. Do you agree the photographs do help you explain those injuries?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, I'm going to move for the admission of, and I've shown these to counsel, I can show him again, photographs 75 through 107.
Your Honor, we have no objections other than those already previously stated on the record. Thank you.
Okay, they're all admitted?
Thank you. Doctor, could you come down, step down, and I'm going to have you stand here next to the monitor and help illustrate some things to the jury. This will be a little bit of a process, and I apologize, but I have to show my examiner which photographs to display, and we'll do it up here. We're going to start with being at the scene. And you're out at the scene for the reasons you've indicated, and I want to orient you to the scene. And we'll start with what has already been admitted, Craig, as Exhibit 46. Do you have that photograph?
You want to go down?
You could drop out the middle of the might help the jury see. Do you see that photograph?
There's nothing on the screen.
All right.
All right, now there is.
All right. Can you just describe what we're looking at here?
Okay, this is a photograph of the decedent as we encountered her in the vegetation, and she is lying on her back. Her hair is fallen across the left side of her face, and her head is turned towards the right side.
Now, in this picture, had you done anything to cause her head or her hair to be in the position that you see them?
No.
Had anybody in your presence done anything like that?
No.
I'm going to show you what we have now admitted as number 75 and ask if you recognize that.
Yes, I do recognize that photograph.
That's, how is this photograph different for our record?
That photograph shows somebody holding Amber's chin. It's actually probably myself.
And you indicated Amber. I said it's April.
I'm sorry, April,
Okay.
sorry. And her hair has been brushed back from her face.
Now, before the hair was moved, were you, let me have the pointer for a second, Doctor. Were you able to see this right here, indicating around her left eye?
No, not while the hair was present.
And did that injury become part of what you further examined back at your office, at the medical examiner's office?
Yes.
I'm going to, and the pictures are admitted, so the jury can ask to see whatever photographs they want. And I'm going to move forward a little bit, if I could, and show 78. Is that now displayed?
Yes, it's on the display.
Can you describe what we're seeing in here? Because there's some different things now that are in this picture. And I'm specifically referring to this and the position of her body.
April's body has been placed on a white transfer sheet, which we'll eventually use to wrap her in before putting her into the body bag that's taken to the medical examiner's office. She's now been turned so that her back is facing up and she's lying towards her stomach.
Why is a transfer sheet, like, what's the purpose of that? Why is there one?
The transfer sheet is just some additional protection as far as hoping to protect and maintain any physical evidence that might be associated with the body.
I'm going to show you this photo, which is the next one I'm going to depict. I want you to describe it for them before I put it up there.
Okay, this is a photo of April's face. The hair has been brushed back.
On her face here, I'm going to point out a couple of things. Right here and right here. What are we seeing right here above her brow?
Those are abrasions, which the colloquial term for abrasions can be as scratches, but they're abrasions above the left eyebrow and the right eyebrow.
And in terms of what this is, do you have any opinion as to what would have caused this, or do you not at this point?
I do not at this point.
Did you examine her state of dress or undress?
Yes.
What was that? Showing the photographs again.
She was lying on her back, and she had a camisole and a lightweight sweater, which had been pulled down around her upper arms to expose her breasts. There was a pink bra present, which had been torn or disrupted between the cups. Then she also had her underwear around her ankles and her blue jean shorts, which were around her left ankle, and this left her genital area exposed.
Can we dim this picture for a moment while I ask a couple more questions, and then we'll continue with photographs. There's a photograph that you viewed and that is now admitted where there's something behind one of her ears. Can you describe what that is and the color of it, so if they want to look at the photo themselves, they can see it?
Are you referring to the kind of orangey tan-ish? Behind the right ear, there are these small, they look almost like sawdust clumps that are kind of orange or tan in color. And what those are fly eggs.
Why was that photograph taken? Why is that important to you forensically?
Well, forensically, we know that fly eggs begin to form relatively soon after a body is deceased, generally within 30 minutes to an hour. So having seen the presence of fly eggs on her body, it gave me some type of frame of reference as far as the fact that her body had been lying out and had been deceased for over that initial period of time, that 32 minutes to an hour that it takes for the fly eggs to form.
So that finding then would be consistent with a body having been there for at least a half hour to an hour?
Yes.
All right, and just for the jury's sake, do you recognize People's Exhibit 78 to depict what you just testified to?
Yes, that's the one.
At a certain point, April is moved to the medical examiner's office, correct?
Yes.
And would you describe what occurs at the medical examiner's office?
At the medical examiner's office,
She's brought in.
she's brought in.
Is
she's
she in a bag?
She's in a body bag, and within that body bag, she's wrapped in the white transfer sheet. And actually, before we even begin the examination, she is, we take whole body x-rays while she's in the bag, because we don't have to open the bag to take x-rays. We have digital x-ray capacity in the office, so we just start taking x-rays from head to toe, and then her body is brought into the autopsy suite, and the photographs begin as far as beginning with her in the body bag and being taken out.
And in this case, were there any initial findings before she was taken out in terms of taking a set of radiographs, is that correct?
The radiographs, the x-rays.
Was there any x-ray finding that was significant to you?
There were none.
Okay. So she's taken out and she's set on the examination table
Yes, in the body bag.
in the body bag and removed from that.
Okay, removed from that, then she's in the white transfer bag, transfer sheet.
And is the sheet then secured?
Well, we do a fair amount of evidence collection before that sheet is secured.
Okay.
So I did the majority of my collection for trace evidence while she was still on the sheet. The sheet was opened, her body was on it, so that if there was anything else that the sheet could catch, it would be there to keep it.
A person's hands might be a source of forensic evidence, is that correct?
Yes.
In this case, was there something done with her hands?
Well, at the scene, her hands were placed into paper bags and secured with tape before she was even put into the white transfer sheet and the body bag. So when she's in the office now, her hands are in the body, her hands are still in the bags, and we don't take those bags off until we're ready to examine the hands further.
So at some point in your examination were the bags removed?
Yes.
Were those bags secured and turned over to law enforcement?
Yes.
And then her fingers, what about her fingers or fingernails? Were those, and I know I may be going out of order here, I just want...
Okay. Yes, her hands were swabbed, palms, backs of the hands, in between the fingers, around the nails, and the fingernails were clipped.
And why would they be clipped?
Because they're long and they may have something of evidentiary value underneath the fingernails. So those are clipped and submitted to law enforcement.
There was some other, in this case you indicated she was disrobed at the scene, right?
She still had clothing on in disarray at the scene.
Was her chest exposed?
Yes, her breasts were
Was her
exposed.
genitalia exposed?
Yes.
In this case, did you do some additional evidence gathering or attempt to gather some additional evidence at the medical examiner's office in light of that finding?
Well, we process all homicides in a very similar method. The clothing is removed, photographed, and turned over for evidence to law enforcement. And then we begin our collection of evidence. And is that what you'd like me to begin with now?
Well, I guess this question, anytime a woman is autopsied, do you do the exact same evidence gathering or attempt to gather evidence?
In a homicide?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So in this case, what did you do?
Well, I would have begun with the hands, with the swabbing of the hands and getting the fingernails, because then we don't have to worry about anything else coming in contact with it. But the evidence I collected in the course of that exam included combings of her hair, pluckings of her hair as a way of getting DNA, her DNA, from the roots. I did swabs of her mouth, her vulva, vagina, and rectum. I did tapings of her face, neck, trunk, and extremities with clear tape to try and pick up any pieces of something that would prove helpful. I did a gynecological exam with a speculum that allowed me to look into the vagina up to the level of the cervix. And I'd mentioned already that I took swabs in this area. I did combings of the pubic hair, and I did pluckings of the pubic hair.
Those were all turned over to law enforcement,
Yes.
what you just described. Did you note then injuries on her
Yes.
externally?
Yes.
I want to go through those if I could, and this is where you may need to refer to your report. Let's start with where you started, blunt impact injuries of the head. And even before that, what does a blunt impact injury mean to a medical examiner?
Blunt impact means that that part of the body has come into contact with some type of a surface or an object that is blunt, flat, rounded, etc. It's distinct from something that's sharp or something that can make a hole.
And you found some of those injuries or evidence of those injuries on her body?
Yes.
Would you begin, I guess, at the beginning? What did you find in number one?
Okay. Number one, there was a blue contusion or bruise, if you prefer, on her right eyelid. That was item number one.
What about her second? Were you about to indicate something further about that injury?
Well, this is number one,
Yes.
listed under blunt impact injuries of the head. I was going to move on to
Number two.
Number two. Okay, in both eyes, she had small hemorrhages as a result of capillaries or small blood vessels bursting underneath the eyelids and on the whites of her eyes, so that they were on both sides.
Is that called petechiae?
Those are called conjunctival petechiae. The conjunctiva is the membrane that covers the surface. The petechiae refers to the fact that these are kind of dot-like, spot-like hemorrhages. And then number three, we found similar petechiae, or these dot-like hemorrhages, inside of her mouth, on the inside of her lips, upper and lower, and along the gum line where her teeth were.
What sorts of, what would cause petechia in both eyes? That you found, the sort of petechia you found?
All right, there's a range of things that can cause petechiae in both the eyes and in the mouth, but what they have in common is that there is generally some type of increased pressure in the abdomen or the chest that causes the pressure in the head to rise, that prevents blood to leave the head, and that's why these capillaries erupt.
Okay. What about number four?
Number four is a contusion on the front of her tongue, a bruise, as you will.
How big was that?
It was 1.5 inches by 1/2 inch.
A bruise on her tongue. It says anterior tongue, what is that?
The front of her tongue.
The front of her tongue.
In the front.
The next injury, number five.
The next injury I have described more in sentence form, and so I'm going to read it and describe as I go along. The left eye is swollen closed by a 3 by 1 inch red abrasion, which is a scrape that was below and lateral to the left eye, or here I'm pointing to my right eye, below and lateral to the left eye, and a 3 by 1 inch purplish red contusion, which is a bruise, if you will, above and lateral to that left eye, with a 1/2 by 1/2 inch abrasion below the left eyebrow arch. So we have abrasion, contusion, another little abrasion below the arch.
I'm going to show you a photograph, and we can keep the lights just as they are. This is going to be this is number 88. You've just described certain injuries to the jury. Does this picture depict those injuries?
Yes. This is the abraded area, this is the contused area, and this is that additional abrasion underneath the left eyebrow.
Describe, if you would, what could cause an injury like that?
A blunt impact with some surface.
The level of injury that you see, and by the way, just so we're clear again, did you explore below the skin to see what we're looking at to help you understand the depth and breadth of that injury?
Yes.
Okay. This injury right here, is that consistent with, for instance, somebody hitting somebody with a stick?
No.
What about something like this, maybe like a log or a small log or something like that?
No, that would leave a different type of mark.
What, describe what it would leave.
It would leave a mark that looked like two parallel lines, kind of like tram tracks. If you think of maybe a log about this big, it would pick up the sides going parallel to each other.
What about an impact, something like this, into that eye socket area?
That is consistent.
Now, right here, I notice certain parallel injuries, and they may be described more fully.
Yes, that's number 7.
Okay, we'll come back to that. And I did, yeah, I guess I should, just for the record, I know the jury saw me, but I showed the doctor People's Exhibit 21, which is the helmet. The next injury you described was not number 7, that was number 6. So tell the jury what number 6 is.
Number 6 is a 1 by 1/2 inch red dash purple contusion or bruise of the nasal bridge and the medial left orbital soft tissue. What that means is the nasal bridge is up here. This whole area is called the orbit, where the eye sits. The medial side of it is the side that's closest to the center of the body. The lateral side is the side that's furthest from the center of the body. But there was the contusion involving this area also.
Doctor, would describe the force necessary to cause someone to look like that. And keeping in mind what you found below there in her eye and all of the injury itself.
Well, this is not an injury that would be caused by a slap or even a punch. We'll talk later about how far these injuries extend, but it's something with a very large force behind it.
Okay. Greg, you can put that picture down, please. Thank you. Number 7, would you describe what that is?
Yes. Though number 7 refers to 3/4 inch in length red linear abrasions above that left eyebrow. I believe that was seen partially in this photo.
We use the term abrasion, I guess. We have it. This is Exhibit 86. Do you see what you just described in that photograph?
What I just described referred to these
The skin that would cause an abrasion, and
scraping that upper layer of skin off, yes.
to my eye, they look nearly parallel. Did they to you? You, at the scene, or I should say, at the medical examiner's office.
These first two do look very parallel. The second, this third one down more towards the eyebrow has a little bit different shape to it, but the upper two are parallel.
Right here that we're looking at, and I'm indicating the left side of her face and the brow injuries. Did these look like they were put onto April at about the same time, or do these look like maybe this happened a week ago and this happened a day ago? I mean,
With respect to a week versus a day, they don't look as though they would have occurred in that manner. As far as being more precisely timed, I don't have much to comment on.
do you see so you don't see, for instance, or did you see evidence of scabbing or anything like that in these
These were
injuries?
fresh wounds. Herringbone pattern contusion around the side of her right eye.
Her right eye?
This one right here, right eye.
I'm going to show you in a moment People's Exhibit 100. You have that?
Is around for clarification.
Okay. What's the next injury, please?
Number 11 refers to a 5 show up as well in this particular photograph, but you can get the suggestion of black and blue kind of type injury beneath the skin there.
What would cause those sorts of injuries?
Again, blunt impact with some object.
All right, what's the next injury, please?
The next is number 12. They are bilateral, both sides. She had abrasions on the outsides of her ears. bruising contusions, to abraded contusions, that's why I was confused. An abraded contusion has a feature of both an abrasion, meaning some of the skin is disrupted, and a bruise. So they're referred to as abraded contusions.
In this case, actually, did you locate some jewelry that was ultimately turned over to law enforcement?
Yes, she was wearing some jewelry. She was wearing a metal chain necklace, and that she had on her at the scene, and we removed it during the autopsy.
Did you locate two other pieces of jewelry that were turned over to law enforcement?
Yes, there were earrings. There were two earrings, one of which was just found. It wasn't noted particularly where it was found, and in the process of removing her clothing, it was, oh, there's an earring. And then another was found stuck against her back.
And that's actually depicted in one of the photographs we've admitted, correct? Pictures you looked at before?
Yes.
And it wasn't stuck into her back, correct?
No, it was just on it,
The next injury,
stuck
please.
onto it. Next is number 13. It's a 2-inch by 1-inch red-purple herringbone pattern contusion of her left lower jaw.
That was the initial side of her face that we saw.
That was the side of her face that we were looking at previously.
And we already saw some evidence of that pointed out with the herringbone pattern on the left side. Do you recall seeing that earlier or no?
I don't know if it's been up on this screen.
Okay. Did that herringbone, well, I'll just show it very quickly to the jury. Yes? I understand. I'm just trying to move it along for our jurors here. Thank you. All right. And thank you for your patience. I know this is kind of a tedious way to do this, doctor, but your patience.
Well, I'm sorry, going between right and left and right and left.
Well, right and left, but also going back and forth with the pictures, but you understand why we're doing that.
Sure.
In this case. That is not the photograph, right? I got it up. Get it up now?
I'm referring to this here.
That's what you just referred to.
Yes, the herringbone pattern. It's about 2 by 1 inches.
For the record, could you indicate what picture that is, Mr. Daly?
Yes, I'm sorry. That was 91.
Thank you, sir.
What's the next injury, please?
It is number 14. It's on the right jaw now. It is a 1 by 1/4 inch abrasion on the right jaw.
The next injury, please.
15?
Yes.
Okay, for the rest of the injuries in this section are injuries that I encountered after I had made the cut to expose the scalp and the skull. And so an incision is made from more or less from ear to ear. The scalp is folded forward, the scalp is folded backwards to expose the under part of the scalp and the skull. So the next things that I'm going to be describing to you, we do not have photographs of.
There are photographs of it, to be
There
clear,
are,
correct?
yes.
But we're going to have you describe them to the jury as opposed to showing that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Number 15 refers to hemorrhages in the bilateral, which means both sides, temporalis muscles. Now the temporalis muscle is right here, and if you put your fingers on it, and clench your teeth, you will feel that muscle contract. That is a muscle that's involved in chewing, smiling, and facial expression and whatnot. So there were hemorrhages in that muscle, not visible from the outside, but on the inside.
Hemorrhage means what?
Hmm?
What does a hemorrhage mean?
Hemorrhage means blood,
Bleeding in that area.
bleeding, yes.
Okay.
Next was a 1 1/4 by 3/4 inch hemorrhage on the inside of the scalp. In the part of the scalp we identify as the parietal area. The parietal area is kind of at the crown, and there was a hemorrhage on the inside of the scalp, right there.
You're indicating
The top of the head, crown of the head, more or less.
what causes that sort of injury?
Okay, a blunt impact, something.
Next injury.
Next is 17. On the left side of the scalp, the underneath part of the scalp, which we call the subscalp, there was a 3 by 2 inch area of hemorrhage. It's located in the left temporal parietal area. So it's this area here. So there's a 3 inch by 2 inch area of hemorrhage in the scalp, the underside of the scalp, on the left.
Again, doctor, what would cause those sorts of injuries?
A blunt impact with some object.
Next injury, please.
Number 18 is a 2 by 1 3/4 inch area, the same type of hemorrhage on the right temporal subscalp. So again, this is the scalp reflected, and the bleeding of the hemorrhage is seen there.
Doctor, would there have to be impact then on both sides of the head to cause those sorts of injuries?
To cause these injuries, yes.
Okay.
Then, number 19, patchy bilateral, that means both sides, right and left. Occipital, which refers to the back of the head. Hemorrhages in the subscalp area. In this case, they were a little bit greater on the right than they were on the left.
And when you found her, her head was turned to the right, is that correct?
Yes.
What would cause injuries like that in the back of her head?
Impact with some blunt objects or surface.
Could that occur by something directly hitting the back of somebody's head?
That's one way it could occur.
If the back of the head is impacting something solid, could that also, in other words, if the head is moved onto something, could that cause those injuries?
Yes.
Is there any sort of force needed to cause these hemorrhages you talked, the scalp hemorrhages you talked about?
Well, certainly a force greater than a slap or a punch.
What's the next injury, please?
Number 20. Okay, I'll read it and then I'll explain it to you. A thin film of subdural hemorrhage overlying all surfaces of the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Okay, at this point, now I have used a saw to remove the skull cap, the bony skull here, to expose the brain tissue underneath that. And the location of the bleeding there was under a tough membrane called the dura. On top of our brains, we have this tough membrane. It's called the dura mater. And underneath it is where the brain is. And so there was hemorrhage between that membrane and the top of the brain surface that encompassed all parts of the brain. The brain is kind of divided for anatomists into different substations. The cerebrum refers to the cerebral hemispheres that you're familiar with, right and left. The cerebellum is the little organ that is more towards the back and more underneath the brain. And then the brain stem is something that connects the two of them. And so there was hemorrhage along all of those surfaces.
And hemorrhage means bleeding again, is that
Bleeding,
correct?
blood.
The next one is quite a long injury.
Okay.
What is that?
The brain sits in the skull, resting on some additional bone. We've got the skull up here, we've got the skull base, and the brain sits on that skull base. And in severe head injuries, when the brain is jostled around within the skull, it smacks that surface. It smacks the surface of those, that brain, the skull base. And it can become bruised the same way any other part of your body can become bruised. And that's what the next item describes. It describes multiple cortical contusions on each side of the brain that involve parts of the underlying front surface and the side surfaces of the brain. And this happened as the brain responded to the head being struck with enough force to rattle that brain around in the bony skull and bruise itself on those bones.
Next injury?
The next injury is hemorrhage or bleeding below the right petrous ridge.
What is that?
The petrous ridge, you have a right one and you have a left one, and they are some of the densest bony structures within the skull. And I did notice that on the right side, it appeared to be that there was hemorrhage within this bone itself, which I eventually could confirm by taking a section of it and looking at it under the microscope to confirm that the bleeding had extended even into this bone.
Is that injury that you just described something that you'd normally see in somebody, well, you're a medical examiner, let's go back to family practice. Is that the sort of injury that you would expect somebody, like a child bumps their head or dad falls down trying to pick his child up, something like that?
No, these aren't the types of injuries that are encountered in the course of normal everyday living, bumps and bruises types of things.
What sort of force is needed to cause an injury below the right petrous ridge?
An extremely strong force. And I would actually like to describe number 23 and then kind of summarize it.
Tell me what 23 is.
Number 23 is the last item in this section. And so, as I'm doing the autopsy and examining the brain is on my table, and I'm cutting it from front to back and laying it out so that I can examine from front to back all of the tissue. And what I saw in the brain was hemorrhage or bleeding in all of the white matter that was present in the brain, from front to side to back. These are called white matter hemorrhages of the brain parenchyma, which is the white matter, which is where the white matter refers to where all these neurons are that are connected to other cells that allow you to move, talk, eat, whatever. And to summarize these injuries of the brain, these types of injuries are the types of injuries that I see in very high impact accidents such as pedestrian versus motor vehicle, or motorcycle versus motor vehicle, or a very severe motor vehicle versus motor vehicle, or even somebody who falls off of a high surface and hits their head on the ground. So these are extremely high impact type injuries.
Is there any chance that one impact causes all of the injuries that you just described, Julie, all 23?
No.
To be clear, what we've gone through in your report is 23 blunt impact injuries of the head. Is that correct?
Correct.
You have another section called blunt impact injuries of the neck.
Yes.
I see there are 11 of them. Is that correct?
Yes.
would you describe at this point, externally, and we may end up going through all 11 of them, but externally, describe what you saw in that area. You don't have to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but if you could just tell them what you see in the neck area externally.
Well, item 1 on here is the largest area of injury on the neck. It's about 6 inches by 4.5 inches. And it is on the front of the neck, the lower neck and the upper chest. And it refers to, again, that reddish purple herringbone pattern contusion or bruise, if you will. And then some additional smaller type abrasions in that same area. So that's the largest of the injuries seen.
Doctor, I have put onto the screen People's Exhibit 93. Do you see that here? Could you make the lights go down a little bit, because it's a little washed out? Thank you.
Okay, so we're looking at this area here. We're looking at this area here. And again, this is this broad swath of herringbone pattern contusion with a few other little abrasions in that same area.
There's a particular one I want to ask you about here, and I'm indicating right across her neck area. Would you describe what that is?
Well, that's kind of an area of clearing, and that's where her necklace was. That's the area that her necklace was.
And that's removed in this picture. The necklace is actually gone.
The necklace is gone.
We have another photograph actually depicting the necklace if the jury wants to look at it.
Correct. And then also is this large abrasion here, which is 3 by 3 inches, and that encompasses the left lower jaw and the left neck.
What sort of force causes that to show up on the body?
Again, another blunt impact injury, an impact by an object or a surface.
There were several other noted injuries that
There were smaller abrasions.
And doctor, then as part of what you did with the head, did you then look into April's neck area below the skin?
Yes.
And what did you find?
Then, after the external exam, then in the course of the autopsy, after we make the incisions that allow us access to the internal part of the body, there was a 3 by 3 inch area of hemorrhage or bleeding in the anterior neck. And this is under the skin. This is not seen on the skin. This is when the incision is made, this is reflected out this area here. There is bleeding in a 3 by 3 inch distribution. There is some smaller hemorrhage towards the right of that, and another large area of hemorrhage towards the left of that. So there's the middle, there's a little bit on the right, and then there's a very large area of hemorrhage under the skin, right in this area here. About 3 by 2 inches is how it was measured. The neck has several layers of muscles to give it all of its flexibility and ability to turn. And so initially I encountered the hemorrhages in the more superficial layers of muscle, but those can be flipped back and to reveal the deeper muscles of the neck. And there were hemorrhages in the deeper muscles of the neck too, that connect deeper structures. And then deep to all of that is the trachea.
Doctor, I'm going to show you this picture here, and you just mentioned trachea. And for the record, this is a diagram as opposed to an actual photograph. You do have a photograph of what you just described, but we're going to use a diagram. And this is 95, as you show.
So this cut edge here refers to some of the more superficial areas of the neck which have been cut, the neck muscles which have been cut for this photograph. These are some of the deeper muscles. And then this illustrates the trachea, which is right here.
What is the trachea? What function?
It's the breathing tube. It's the tube that connects the back of our throats with the lungs. So down here, way down here, the trachea would split off into the bronchi, which are the breathing tubes that go into the lungs. But this is the big breathing tube in the neck. The other thing we see here is the jugular vein, which is a vein that we have on each side, right and left, and the carotid artery system, which we also have on the right side and the left side.
And the purpose of the, just generally speaking, not the carotid artery, what is that for? And the jugular vein?
Well, the carotid artery delivers blood from the heart to all of the structures in the head, and the jugular vein drains blood from the head, heading back into the heart.
And how deep did you see the hemorrhages in the neck muscle area?
In the superficial or outer layers and in the deeper layers, which lie below the superficial areas. And then deep to that, underneath all of the muscles, is the trachea. And there was hemorrhage throughout this trachea, throughout this tube.
Could that account for some of the blood that we saw in April's mouth at the scene?
It could have.
And we have a couple of other issues I wanted to ask, specifically about the thyroid.
Well, we'll get there. Number 9 is hemorrhage in the soft tissues that go around the trachea and the esophagus. You can't really see the esophagus in this view. The esophagus is right up against the trachea behind it. So in addition to the hemorrhages that were seen in the muscles and the hemorrhages that were seen in the trachea, there's this soft tissue that connects all of that, which also had hemorrhage in this area. And this is called the thyroid cartilage. This is covered with muscle, with small muscle and soft tissue, and there was hemorrhage in that as well.
In the thyroid itself, in the thyroid...
The thyroid gland is right here. Okay.
And is that something that's well protected or not on a person in terms of layers of skin and muscle? And
It's fairly well protected. I noted that there was hemorrhage in the capsule, which is kind of the filmy coating around the thyroid gland. And then by incising or cutting into the thyroid gland, additional hemorrhage in the actual gland itself was seen that I could look at under the microscope and confirm that there was hemorrhage or bleeding into this gland here, which was in the neck.
all right. You did some additional examination. You examined her trunk and her extremities, correct?
Yes.
The trunk being her torso area, extremities, arms, legs, feet, hands.
Yes.
And you found, let's see, 14 more injuries that you noted, is that correct?
Yes, a total of 14 areas of injury, one of which was internal.
What was that one?
Pardon me?
What would you describe that one as?
This is the carotid artery. What it's coming off of is a structure here called the aorta, which is that big blood vessel that carries all the blood to various parts of our body. The aorta has a curvy area at the top that's called the aortic arch. And again, soft tissue, soft connective tissue all around it. So there was hemorrhage noted in that area as well.
What sort of force on a person would cause that injury around the aorta?
Blunt impact injuries.
I think all of the injuries now in the trunk and the extremities, you term them blunt impact.
All of the injuries in the head, neck, trunk, and extremities are all blunt impact injuries, meaning no sharp objects were used. These weren't stabs. These were incised wounds. Certainly weren't gunshot wounds. And so these were blunt impact injuries. They were all of that nature.
I want to talk about a couple of injuries that you noted on the extremities. I'm going to put up a photograph and ask you to describe what you're looking at. This is for the record going to be 83. Do you see that now? Is it up there yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
All right, now I see it.
Describe what part of the body we're looking at and what you're seeing there.
This is her right arm. This is the elbow down here. Her hand would be up in this direction. Her shoulder would be up in that direction. And these are abraded contusions on the kind of the back and side of that right arm.
An abraded contusion, again, just so we're clear what that
An
is.
abraded contusion is a type of blunt impact injury that has features of both an abrasion, which is removal of the skin, and you can kind of see that, you can sense that there are skin edges exposed here, and also of a contusion with bruising. So an abraded contusion is how we describe it.
Doctor, if a person was to apply a fair amount of force onto the arm and cause scraping across the arm at the same time, could you get something that looks like that?
Yes, that would be consistent with a grabbing type activity.
And Craig, could you play this photograph? This is going to be 85. Do you see what I've, okay, so we have 85 up. What are we looking at there?
Okay, again, this is her right forearm now. The elbow is kind of right here, shoulder up here, hand down here. This is a little cluster of contusions or bruises on this part of her right forearm.
You saw several other injuries on her extremities, is that correct?
Yes.
Would you give a general description as to what sorts of injuries you saw on her extremities?
There were contusions or bruises, some abrasions, the abraded contusions. And again, those would be the types of injuries seen on the extremities. The bulk of the injuries were to the head and neck area. There were smaller injuries to the trunk and the extremities.
In terms of what I guess I would use serious injuries on April, did you see any below about where I'm holding my hands, like maybe where the aorta comes through? Anything below that? And in this case, you already told the jury, aside from externally and internally examining April, you did some slide work. You described what you actually have to do to look at the tissue under a microscope. Is that right?
Well, yes. Various organs are taken in small biopsy-sized pieces and made into microscopic slides that I can look at under the microscope to either confirm or refute things that I've seen with the naked eye.
Did you conduct a further examination of the rest of April, her kidneys, her liver, her spleen, anything like that?
Yes, that would be the rest of the internal examination that examines all of the organs and all of the body cavities.
Did you find anything significant that in those areas that helped you determine the cause or manner of death?
No.
Did you see any disease process going on inside the April?
No.
There was a toxicology test in this case, and there was One finding, what was that?
Caffeine.
In any way significant to your finding of cause and manner of death?
No.
With the information you gathered, were you able to determine a cause of death and a manner of death?
Yes.
The manner of death is what in this case?
The manner of death?
Yes.
Homicide. Meaning that these injuries were...
You can sit down and talk.
Okay, the manner, again, is the characterization of how these injuries came about or how this death came about. And for a forensic pathologist, the term homicide refers to the fact that this was caused by another individual.
In this case, were you able to determine the cause of death?
Yes.
What was that?
The cause of death is blunt head trauma and asphyxia due to neck compression.
Blunt head trauma, you talked quite a bit about what that was. I'm assuming that has some manifestation in the brain injuries you talked about. Is that correct?
Yes, all of those injuries, yes.
And all the injuries you talked about with the subscalp hemorrhages and everything else you described?
Yes.
About the head area. And then what about asphyxia due to neck compression?
Okay, the definition of asphyxia is that the cells of the body cannot either take up oxygen, they can't receive oxygen, or they can't get rid of the byproducts of oxygen. And I'll give you some examples of asphyxial type deaths. Okay. Drowning is an asphyxial type death. Hanging is an asphyxial type death. Choking is an asphyxial type death. Strangulation also. And this death also was an asphyxial death due to the compression of the structures in her neck that would have involved the delivery of oxygen to the rest of her body. And by that I mean the trachea, which is the breathing tube, the carotid arteries, which are the arteries that deliver blood to the head, and the jugular vein, which drains the blood from the head.
Doctor, in a number of the injuries you described and the reports admitted to the jury to look at, and so choose, you indicated some of the herringbone pattern injuries were consistent with a shoe tread. You found that significant enough to put into your report?
Yes.
Did that, in your mind, have something to do with April death?
Yes, that indicated to me that somebody stood on her neck.
Timing of injuries and death and things of that sort may not be a favorite subject for a doctor, but I'm going to ask you, if someone stands or cuts off the airway or the jugular or the carotid, is it instant death?
No, first you're going to lose consciousness. And you're going to lose consciousness over a period of about 10 to 15 seconds.
And what about a time for death when someone's dies by neck asphyxia?
Death by asphyxia occurs, and I'm using in general terms, ballpark terms, of over a period of 3 to 5 minutes.
And that's how long that pressure would have to be maintained in that area. 3 to 5 minutes, generally speaking.
Yes.
Could I just have one moment, please? Doctor, I don't have any information.
May I move this now? It's okay. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
I'll leave this here. I don't want to mess up anything. From all the injuries that you saw, I believe you said 23 in the head area, correct?
Well, I can, yes,
Okay. 11 in the neck area, correct?
yes,
And then 13 or 14, including one internal, correct?
yes,
Okay. And I believe you also indicated in response to Mr. Daly's questioning that there's no injury below, I guess, the sternum area. Is that about right?
no significant
No
injuries.
significant injury. Okay. None that contributed to the death, correct?
Correct,
Now, you've told, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, about cause and manner of death. In your profession, when you say homicide, it doesn't necessarily mean murder, correct?
correct,
Homicide just simply means at the hands of somebody else, correct?
correct,
Okay. Now, you also indicated in response to Mr. Daly's question that the injury that you saw on the neck would be consistent with that helmet that he showed you, correct?
that is one of the things that could have caused that. It's
Okay.
not to the exclusion of all others.
Thank you. That's the point that I wanted to make. So in other words, if somebody had something like a bowling ball or something else that had a similar sort of surface, it could have caused that injury as well, correct?
Yes,
Now, you have 14 people here on the jury, so if each one of them proposed different objects, like, do you know what a bocce ball is?
yes,
Okay, something like that, and they each propose a different thing, you could find 14 different things that could be consistent with causing that injury, correct?
yes,
Did you have an occasion to actually look at that helmet?
no,
For the kind of injuries that you indicated it would take a lot of force. So using that kind of force, would you have expected some sort of indentation or something, some sort of damage to the helmet with that kind of force?
well, no, these were soft tissues that were, if, for example, the helmet was the object. The helmet was impacting soft tissues. So the helmet is much harder than the soft tissues. So I wouldn't expect anything necessarily being on the helmet.
Would you possibly expect hair from the eyebrow to be on it, or blood, or some? Blood usually makes things stickier, right?
Yes,
Okay, and I think that it's mostly referred to almost like the viscosity of motor oil, correct?
I'm sorry?
It's kind of like the viscosity of motor oil, like in a car, you know how it's slippery and...
Oh, I've never really thought of it like that, but, okay, blood has a viscosity, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I don't mislead the jury. It is kind of slippery, right? That's why you often see with stabbings where the person's got cuts and so forth, right?
Well, yes, it's a liquid.
It's a liquid, right. And now, would you have expected some blood to have got on that helmet?
At some point, I would have.
Okay. Would you have expected that once some blood got on that helmet, some hair, a leaf, something else, a skin cell, something may have stuck to that blood, correct?
For a period of time, yes, unless the helmet was washed.
Okay. And what would it take to wash that helmet so that no DNA appears on it at all?
I don't know.
Is there substances that would eradicate any kind of DNA on it?
I don't know.
Okay. So now, back to the injury that we have here. The two injuries, asphyxia and the blunt injury, did you find one more the cause of the other, or are they like 50-50?
50-50. Either one alone could have caused the death.
Okay, let's just take the blunt force one. How would that have caused death itself without the asphyxiation?
That would have caused death by the underlying injury to the brain and the centers in the brain that are responsible for consciousness.
So the person would have lost consciousness in 10 to 15 seconds, right? Like you said?
Well, with asphyxia, a person loses consciousness in 10 to 15 seconds. I don't know how long it would take them to lose consciousness with a blunt force injury or how many injuries.
Okay, so the mechanism of the blunt force injury would be the impact that it has on the brain, correct?
Yes.
What about bleeding? Would that be another cause of death from the blunt force?
No, bleeding is present, but it's not a prominent feature underlying the mechanism of death here,
In this particular instance?
in this particular instance.
Okay, all right. And also in terms of the impact that it had, it's the swelling that becomes a problem, right? when there's injuries to a head, to a brain area?
Well, yes, it is. The swelling becomes more of a problem if there is more of a prolonged survival after the injury. I mean, a brain that is deprived of oxygen begins to swell immediately. And then, for example, patients who are in the hospital for days, etc., after an injury sometimes experience even more swelling after that, after the initial insult.
Okay, now for us lay people, what would you say immediately? Matter of seconds, matter of minutes when you say that swelling begins immediately?
Well, on a cellular level, I'm sure it begins immediately, but as far as something to be evidenced, it would be minutes.
Okay. And as far as asphyxia in this case, that's where you indicated it would take about 10 to 15 minutes to lose consciousness, correct?
No, 10 or 15 seconds to lose consciousness.
Seconds. And then it would take the 3 to 5 minutes perhaps for death to occur, correct?
Correct.
Now, from what you saw, were both of these multiple injuries, or in other words, to the best of your knowledge, did the assailant kind of stomp on the neck or just press it once and exert asphyxia?
Well, it couldn't have been a matter of them just stomping once, because that same patterned contusion was seen in multiple places on the face and the neck and the upper chest. So all of that could not have been inflicted with one pressure or one step to that area. So there were multiple areas of injury. And the same goes for the head injuries. The head injuries were so global that not just one injury could have caused that.
What's your definition of global, ma'am?
Global means everything. They were injuries in the frontal lobes, the parietal lobes, the occipital lobes, the temporal lobes, all of those white matter hemorrhages that I described, and those contusions that were seen on the base of the brain as it smacked into the skull base, and the bleeding that was seen around the cerebral hemispheres and the cerebellar hemispheres and the brainstem.
If not for the contusions, could you draw the conclusion that asphyxia was only administered once?
No.
So independent of the contusions?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes, I think I asked you if the asphyxia was indicated by inflicting one blow on the young lady. And you said no because you saw the other contusions, correct? Like shoe marks or whatever,
Right.
Okay. If you hadn't seen the shoe marks with the injury to the neck that you define as asphyxia, could that have been caused by one, I don't know what you want to call it, one instance of exerting pressure on the lady's neck?
So we're talking about not considering the head injuries at all.
Right, or the contusions, just simply the asphyxia, in other
Or
words.
the
just-
contusions where? Because these herringbone patterns, those are contusions also.
Right, those are in the neck area, correct?
The neck and chest and by the eye and by the jaw.
Did you find one that was predominant that caused asphyxia?
The ones that were associated with the neck would have been the ones that caused the asphyxia. The one next to the eye would not have caused asphyxia.
Okay. Now, let's back up. You talked about that the young lady's hands were bagged, correct?
Yes,
Okay, you were at the scene about 1 a.m., correct?
yes,
Okay. Get back to the medical examiner's office. Was it you that took the bags off the young lady?
yes,
Okay, and you scissors to just cut them off?
yes,
Okay, and did you then clip the nails?
yes.
Okay, and you said that they're sent out. What happens exactly to the clippings?
They are turned over to law enforcement.
Did you come to find out subsequently if there was any DNA material or anything on them?
I was not notified specifically about those results, but my understanding is that there was not.
Okay, and is that something that's, I know you've been doing this a long time, is that something you would at least maybe perhaps see? Or is it something you would not have seen until the lab results come?
Well, I'd say there's a 50-50 chance that you'd see it. If she went down quickly after being struck in the head by some object, she would maybe not have been able to fight back in any way that would have been able to have her accumulate that kind of DNA evidence under her fingernails.
Okay, and I think you answered my next question. Could you tell, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what defensive wounds are, please?
defensive wounds, if you believe in them, refer to wounds that the person who is being attacked suffers in the course of defending themselves against an attack. For example, I'll give you an example. If somebody's coming at me with a metal pipe and I were to put up my arm to shield my face and I would get this big bruise here on my upper arm, that could be considered a defensive wound.
Why did you preface your answer with saying if you believe in them? Is there some controversy about
For myself, there is, because I don't know this, when I don't know the circumstances of how an activity actually occurred, then I don't assign defensive type wounds.
Well, I'm not trying to somehow get you to say that there were or were not defensive wounds in this case, but defensive wounds is something that's part of the protocol to look for when you have a homicide, correct?
You can assess for your opinion of a set of defensive wounds.
So are you saying, do you ever find them or you never find them in your practice?
I find them quite rarely.
Okay. And as far as anything else that tied, were you given any other lab results about anything else other than, I think you indicated that the toxicology came back that there was presence of caffeine, correct?
That there was what?
Presence of caffeine?
No, I was not given any other lab results.
Okay. So you can't shed any light as to, you can on the injuries, the severity and the nature, the cause and the manner, but you can't help these ladies and gentlemen of the jury determine who inflicted those injuries, can you?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, if I may briefly. From what you saw from appearing at the scene and subsequently reviewing the body, did you think that the assailant and Ms. Millsap had interaction for a while?
Define a while.
Would you say, was it just like a couple of minutes, or would you say a little bit longer than a couple of minutes, maybe between 5 to 10, 10 to 15 minutes, for all these injuries to have occurred?
I think, again, ballpark figure, I think that these injuries could have occurred over a period of 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes, okay. Is there any way for you to tell if there was just one attacker or if there were multiple attackers from the injuries?
No, not from the injuries.
Did you ever examine how many sources of DNA were at the crime scene? Did you look for semen or anything like that?
Well, yes, that's the purpose of taking the swabs and for doing the speculum examination, the gynecologic examination.
Okay, and you did not find anything, correct?
I did not.
Okay. What are some of the things that you would have expected somebody to excrete DNA from? If we're not familiar with it, we watch TV and we always think it's blood, but what else? I mean, the saliva, skin, touch. What are some of the things that would...
Well, any body surface could potentially leave DNA behind, whether it's your skin, whether it's the fluid in your tears, whether it's saliva, whether it's your blood.
Hair, if it's from the root.
Hair could leave that type of DNA evidence, yes.
What about sweat? If you know.
I don't know.
Okay. Now, you indicated that you saw some, I want to be delicate, some fly eggs on the body or something?
Yes.
Okay. And they're also used often to determine time of death, are they not?
I do not use those to determine time of death at all.
But you know that they are by etymologists or whatever they call them, correct?
I'll have to take your word for it.
So you've never heard of that in your entire experience?
I know that determining the time of death is fraught with many problems and inconsistencies. So, again, I have my own ways of trying to assess that, and I don't keep up on what other fields are doing.
Okay, and in terms of determining the time of death, that, despite what we see on TV and stuff, is a pretty rather inexact science, is it not?
It is.
Okay. You have to know a lot about the ambient circumstances, correct?
Well, even if you do know a lot about the ambiance and the circumstances, it's still a very inconsistent determination.
These flies that you're talking about, do you remember what color they were, the ones that you saw?
They're not flies, they're
I'm sorry,
fly
fly eggs.
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 Yes, there were flies on her because this was outside in a wooded area, and in July there are flies.
What color were those eggs? If you-
Fly eggs are kind of a tannish, orangish, sometimes they're a tannish white color, and they remind me of sawdust.
One moment. I'm just going to check my notes. I don't have anything further. Thank you, Doctor.
I just want to be clear and clear up a couple of little things. One, her bra that she was wearing, did the medical examiner's office cut the area between the two cups?
No, that had been done prior to our arrival on the scene. That's how I found her, with her bra torn or cut between the cups.
And her clothing, all the clothing you described was turned over to law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay. And one other thing, I just wanted to show you this picture because the jury decided to look at these photographs. For the record, Mr. Sheik, I'm referring to 106.
Thank you, sir.
It's a photograph. Do you recognize that to be of her right hand
Yes.
at the medical examiner's office?
Yes.
And there appears to be like some, looks like the nails are clipped, by the way.
They are?
And there's something on each of the finger pads, just so they don't look at it later and not know what that is. What is that?
That is from fingerprinting her, the decedent. We fingerprint them.
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yes, just very briefly. If I may just ask Mr. Daly one brief question before I...
I did not.
Don't get old, Doctor. It's now fun. What I wanted to ask you was, in response to Mr. Daly's questioning you about the bra being cut, right? Or torn.
Or however it became separated. Yes.
Did you ever come to find out if that was done by the assailant or somebody trying to administer first aid or anything? Did you ever...
Well, there was no evidence that first aid was administered
Okay.
to the individual. And so I don't know how this bra came to become separated in that manner.
Okay, and it sounds like you looked at it a few times, right?
Looked at what a few
The
times?
bra, where it was...
Sure.
Okay, and doesn't sound like you have a definitive answer to if it looks like it was torn or cut with something, correct?
I don't have a definitive answer.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
I'm just going to show the jury the picture now, get out of the way, of her clothing. Okay, you have a picture of the clothing, it's Exhibit 103. It's just the two items of clothing. You have that? Do you recognize that to be the clothing, doctor?
Yes,
Brassiere, and then another article of clothing below that.
that was a little sweater.
That was a little sweater. And in the middle, it depicts the clothing as you found it.
Yes,
But obviously not on the body at this point.
it was lying aside.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Good, I'm just going to approach this picture real quick. Nothing further, thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor. You're excused.
Thank you.
The next witness will be on 15 minutes.
Yes, Your Honor.
You can leave that
Any
real
more?
quick.
Not really more, probably about 20 minutes, we'll need 5 minutes to just readjust this, and I can get them in, we'll stop.
Well, but then he's got to call. So you may be 20 minutes, but I don't know how long he'll be. I'll see you tomorrow at 10:30, folks. That's 10:30. A little bit smaller docket tomorrow.
All rise for the jury.
Please don't read anything, watch anything, listen, you know the rules.